I'd like to talk about something that you might not know or might know. I would love to hear feedback if this all is old news for you all, or if this is something that you actually haven't heard before. Based on my work, I basically see these problems, or the things that I talk about, I see them done wrong all the time. So I'd rather talk about them even in this particular venue. Also, if my clicker doesn't work. And when I say I see that at work, what work is that? So I'm a developer advocate here in Zurich at Google. So I work in the Europali office, not far from here, and I work in the web content ecosystem team. So what does that mean? Basically, I am here to help you be successful in search and make good websites that people can use and are happy to use and find. And a question I often get from developers specifically, and I asked myself that before I started working in search as well, was why should I care about search? I kind of knew the answer, but I think it's worth reiterating. Because if we are building websites, I mean, we're doing this for users, right? So if I build this fantastic website about cats, and holy shit, there's like cool cats, this has a fantastic 90s star background, and this has a hat and cool sunglasses. So if I build this website, I don't do that. I mean, this website, probably I do it for the fun of it. But realistically, if I do it professionally, I want people to find my website and use my website. I need users on my website. So the question then becomes, how do I get users? Because if I don't do anything, just put my website online somewhere, and this is easier than ever. You can use Now or Zeit or Search or GitHub pages or I don't know what else is there. So many things. You can literally just start on glitch.com or something like that. You might see this. You might see no one coming to your website. That's not what we are making websites for. And if this is a business, then you will be very, very sad and probably looking for a new job. I mean, Leap is hiring, so that's probably good. Very soon. So the question then becomes, how do people find new websites? If I make a product and it's the best product on the earth, then how do I make sure that people are finding it? Well, how do you find new websites? You're probably not Googling for the website specifically, but you're Googling for whatever the website offers, right? I need a website with cool cats, I need a website with cute doggos, I need a website that teaches me how scoped slots work. Something like that. So you're searching for something, and then you're probably clicking on the search results, and probably not on the last search result on the last page, but probably in one of the first couple of search results. So that brings me to the question, how does Google actually index your app? How do we put your website or your web app into our search engine? I think this is useful to understand what's happening in search, and also to debunk some things that some people, SEOs, oh, where did that come from, sometimes tell you, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So the regular flow is like this. We have a queue with a bunch of URLs. Where we found them is a different topic. This could be someone is linking to a URL, then it goes in, and we are crawling that other URL that is linking to you, we're putting this into the crawl queue, or it's coming from a website that we happen to know, and we know a lot of websites already. Basically, like, we start with a seed of websites that we tend to know, and then you can either submit websites as well, or we find them. And the first thing we do is we take one of these URLs from the big stash, and the crawler goes and visits your website. Have you ever used like curl or wget or something? That's what the crawler does. It goes to your website and basically just downloads the HTML. Now, with modern websites, that's not a good strategy to just use that, because your website's probably going to look like HTML, script tag, /HTML. So we wouldn't see your content here. So instead what we're doing is we're passing the raw HTML on to the next stage in our pipeline. This is the processing stage. The processing stage does take a first look at the HTML, because in this HTML, if it's a classical website or if you're doing server-side rendering, we might already find other URLs because we are looking at links. So basically we're looking at the link tags that we've got in here, and if we find any URLs from that, at the same time we do two things. One thing is we are putting the URL that we just found in the links, or the multiple URLs that we found from the links, into the crawl queue for later crawling, and at the same time we are putting the website into, so the HTML that we've got, into what we call the render queue. Eventually, as we have resources available, this is going to be rendered. So the renderer is basically a headless Chrome. So we run a headless Chromium instance. It's not just a headless Chromium instance, it's a specific version of, we call this the web rendering service. It's a very specific version of Chromium 41. So it's 3 years old. So if it would be a child, it could walk and talk now. Probably gets to the Kinski soon. But yeah, so it's very, very specific custom code in that one. It doesn't support everything. If it's code 41, you can imagine ES6 doesn't go so well right now. But basically, we can't render everything at one go because the web is pretty large. In 2017, 16, I think the number is from 2016, we saw 160 trillion websites or web pages. So we can't render everything in one go, so we put this queue in between. So basically, there's something that you might figure out at this point. This is a queue, and this is a queue. Queues mean waiting. So that means just because we just saw someone linking to your website doesn't mean that we're immediately starting this process, right? You might still have to wait a little bit in this queue. We can't queue everything, crawl everything in the immediate moment. The same goes here. Once we have crawled it, we can't just start doing something like rendering. We have to wait until we have the resources available. So once we have rendered it, the rendered HTML goes back to the processing stage. And this is interesting because at this point, the JavaScript has executed and we know what your website is about, even if it's a JavaScript web app. And that's great because we can then put this into the index. So basically, at this point, we know that, okay, this has a bunch of images of cats, that's great. It has some text as well describing why this is probably the best cat picture website ever. And basically, we now know that we have a website about cat images that we can put into the index. And last but not least, once someone types in cool cat pictures online, or kitten corner, or something like that, or fantastic cool cat with a hat and sunglasses, the last stage kicks in, which is we are starting to rank it. So we're looking at everything we've got in the index that might contain cool cat images, or cats with hats and sunglasses, and try to figure out which is the best one. The last bit, this ranking bit, is a very, very different process from the entire rest of it. So don't worry too much about the ranking process. It is very, very specific. There's over 200 ranking factors. I can't name them, but let's put it that way. Speed is one of them, so how fast did your website respond in the rendering and crawling stage? How well does it speak to the index query? So basically, not every website, even it can be the best website ever, if it doesn't speak to the query. So if my query is very specific, hats with cats and sunglasses, a cat picture website with fantastic cat pictures might not rank well for that query because it doesn't contain anything that says cat with hat and sunglasses. Doesn't mean that other website is not good, it's just not as good for this particular query. So the ranking bit is like your least concern. The rest, this entire process, is a tricky one. Because things can go wrong. Cool. So how do people get to my website? Because if I search for cool cat pictures, I probably get like a gazillion, trillion website search results. So how can I make sure that my website gets picked? Now, if I search for cute doggos, I might see something like this as a user. So as a user, I want cute doggos, and I want as many as possible, and I want the cutest doggos. So I start looking at the search results. And as a user, I do something that Google wants to do as well, and that's the ranking bits and pieces, and also this will drive dependence. So like, let's say these all rank pretty well for this query, because they are showing up in the first 3 search results. But what do I do as a user? So I'd probably say like, okay, I want the cutest and fluffiest and cuddliest dogs and puppers, and looking at the information architecture here, I probably start reading just these 3 lines, these headings, the links that will take me to something. And I see like 40 of the cutest, fluffiest, and cuddliest puppers and doggos. Yes, this is good news. I like that. It's 40 and it's the cutest and fluffiest and cuddliest. Okay, cool. Cutest doggos on Twitter. That might just be a misleading name, right? This might be about anything. I don't know if this is actually cute doggo pictures or something. I don't know. It's a Twitter user apparently, so I don't know. And then we have 21 joyous photos of doggos to put a smile on your face. Okay, it's only 21, but maybe if they're better, I'd be compelled. So I want to make a decision between these 2 of them, and maybe understand what this specifically is. So I look at this meta description. So this is a description snippet. It doesn't have a length restriction, but that doesn't mean that we're displaying everything that you're giving us. So you can specify this bit, but if you try to bullshit us, we're gonna happily throw it away and pick what we think is relevant from your website. And also, depending on the screen size and the user and the bandwidth and everything else, we might show a little more or a little less of it. So give us something reasonable, but make it as short as possible, but don't worry too much about size restrictions. Take 300 characters, 500 characters, 100 characters. We'll try to pick the most relevant bits from it using language processing. So here's like, it says 40 of the cutest dogs alive, even alive, so that means I could go there and hug them probably. So that's fantastic. This is just like the latest tweets, so I don't know if this is good or not. Cutest dogs on the planet, I don't know. And then here we have like, we recently asked subscribers to the BuzzFeed Animals newsletter to submit pictures of their super cute pets. But that might be something else than a doggo. So I think this search result is probably the best search result. Also, if you have a date somewhere that tells us how fresh this result is, this might be useful. Especially if you're like blogging or writing documentation or something. Documentation might outdate, so that having a date somewhere in your content is definitely helpful. Now, what does that mean for our Vue.js application? And I don't comprehend why people are not doing some of these things, but I'll mention them. You probably want to use Vue Meta. Who here is using it today? See, that's not all hands going up. So who here does not like to raise their hand? Okay, good, fantastic. Good. So basically what you do is once you have Vue Meta in your project, for the components or views that you care about, you can specify the meta info method and give it the title that can come from some reactive data like props or data or computed or whatever. And you can give us a description. These two things are important. The reason why I'm saying that is because they show up in search results. If you don't give us something, we might make it up. And especially with a title, that can sometimes go pretty wrong because we just have to make something up, and you should control this information. If you have a marketing department or a sales department and they do some SEO, they might come around every now and then and ask you to like change these or even just set them, so now you know how to do that. It's unfortunate that you have to install an external component, but that's the situation that you're in. Another thing is make sure to use the history mode on your router. Do not use hash or hash bang URLs. The reason for that is that the hash in the fragment identifier, the hash bang, whatever you want to call it, in URLs is basically, we used to abuse it because we didn't have any better ways of making single-page applications, but it's theoretically violating the standard. The hash in a URL usually means that you jump to a specific piece of the content that is already on the page. So if you're changing the hash and the content on the page changes, that is against the standard. And that was the only way to build single-page applications like 3 years ago, but I say 3 years ago, we now have better ways, and for one of them is the history API. It does require to make sure that your server configuration is correctly set up, but I think that's worth it if you're professionally doing this. You're a professional developer, so you know how to configure your servers probably. If you're not, then talk to your ops department, because they should know that. So make sure that you're using proper URLs using the history mode. And it's okay to use that. We have come to the point where even Internet Explorer 11 does support it. Yes, Internet Explorer 10 users might have like a page refresh, but honestly, if you're on Internet Explorer 10 or 8 or 6, Asia, a lot of people are still on Internet Explorer 6, I believe, or at least have been last year. They get a page refresh, but if you're using such an old browser, then you're pretty happy to get a page refresh, I guess. Same goes for Opera Mini. These are people on resource-constrained devices or resource-constrained networks, so they'd rather not run some JavaScript, they'd rather have the page refresh and the battery to last a little longer, so that's not a problem really. So now, let's say you have a website already, because you're probably not starting from scratch. How do I debug it? How do I debug search for it? Because maybe someone from the marketing department comes and pesters you with weird questions and says, we can't use Vue.js, we can't use this, we can't use that because of search. Then you can tell them to bugger off if that's not true, because you can debug things. One of the easiest ways to quickly do a smoke test and see how you're doing is the mobile-friendly test. You just plug in a URL and you get a result. Now the obvious thing that it does is it tells you if the page is mobile-friendly. Duh, it's in the name. But that's not the only thing that it does. More interestingly, it also shows you how Google is seeing the page. There's still a bug, and I still talk to, I basically every week I write an email to a certain team within Google to fix that. You can't scroll on that screenshot. Sorry. That doesn't mean that your content isn't there. This just shows you okay, yes, my content does show up. It's not a blank page. It can happen, especially if you ship ES6 untranspiled to the browsers, that search just shows you a blank page. That would not be so. If you want to make doubly sure that your content is showing up, you can also use the rendered HTML view. That is literally what we get back from the renderer. So this is what we are using for indexing. This is not some approximation or some magic. This is literally the HTML that we are seeing in search. And you can search through it. You can say like, okay, so for instance, my meta description is here, that's good news. My title is here, that is good news as well. And then I could scroll and see like if my links look good and stuff like that. So basically, I can check if my content shows up in search. That's pretty good. If it shows up here, you're pretty much safe, right? Pretty much safe. If you want to debug issues, let's say you see a blank page, you can actually see all the JavaScript errors, including stack traces. So we give you that as well. So you get that right there in the test. It's no longer, Search Console had a feature called Fetch and Render that gave you the screenshot, the full page screenshot, so you could scroll, yay. But unfortunately it didn't give you any errors. So if you see a blank page, you see a blank image, and you're like, and now what? This has JavaScript console log. Pretty much everything that you have in the regular browser console shows up in here. That's pretty good. Another great tool that you can use is Search Console. Now, Search Console shows a bunch of interesting data about your website, but you don't necessarily want that public. You probably don't want to tell everyone how often your website shows up for a certain query, so you have to verify your domain. If you're using Google Analytics, that is very easy because you have already proved domain ownership to Google. Here, for a bunch of other ways, you can use a meta tag, I think an HTTP header, certain email features work as well, and some other things. So like you can basically verify for your domain, and then you get an overview of how many pages of your website we have in the index, how many pages we excluded from the index that can have many different reasons, and how many errors happened. And you also see some other data here. Interesting is also you have this URL inspection tool that is basically fetch and render is not going to come back in the new Search Console. This is going to be integrated into this URL inspection tool. It shows you if a URL that you're entering from your website is on Google, so if it can be found, if we index it, when it has last been indexed, when it has last been crawled. If it's not on the index, why is it not in the index? What happened? What went wrong there? You see things like mobile usability issues here, and we probably also soon will show you the JavaScript errors here as well. So basically, this is your one-stop shop for debugging something that exists, and you want to get some more deep insights. You can see what we have in the index, and for the test live URL, so basically if your URL is really fresh, let's say you have a blog post that just came out today, and you want to see if it could be indexed. It isn't indexed yet because it's in the queue probably, but you want to check if it could be indexed. You could use the test live URL, and it will show you if it can be indexed potentially once it is through the queue. You also get analytics, that's maybe not that interesting unless it's like your private website or you're really like a startup owner or someone in marketing, because you can see what queries were used to make your website show up in search results, how often were they clicked, how often were they shown, and on which average position were they shown, and then you can see patterns. So here we see like this is probably a weekly pattern. On the weekends there's more traffic, during the week there's less traffic. That's often the case for blogs. But if this would like go vdoop at some point when it shouldn't, then you know that something has gone wrong, and you can probably deal with it. It also sends you messages. So this is really nice. If we are seeing like anomalies, like let's say like 100 pages from your website disappear from the index, you get an email like, hey, there's a significant drop in index coverage from your website. Is that something that you wanted because you just like removed a bunch of stuff that you no longer have on the website, or was that an error? So this is really, really helpful because it proactively informs you. You also get things like the links report and some other interesting things like mobile usability reports. So you get like a bunch of data from this one. Another thing that is particularly important to me as being on that team is we are here to help. My job is literally to make you more successful with search and to help you build websites or web apps that can be found in search. So we have a bunch of documentation. There's more to come. If you think that we are missing important documentation, or you feel like there's like a huge misunderstanding somewhere, let us know. We are happy to fix that. But basically we have this documentation website out there, and I think it's underrated. We are having a bunch of information on videos on YouTube already. We are making more videos to come. Especially there's an entire video series coming out, hopefully this quarter, on JavaScript SEO for all the major frameworks and in general. So that's pretty interesting as well. We have a forum. If you have any questions or see any issues, there's a bunch of people who are really, really smart and have seen it all probably. And we are also looking into this one. So the Webmaster Forum is your best bet to get some more insights into a specific problem case, or where you see like something doesn't make sense and you want to hear what people think, or if people think there's a problem or how to fix that, the forum is your best bet. And we do these office hours. Sometimes we do them in person. So you can visit the office and talk to us in person, face to face. And if not, then we make them happen via the internet. You can dial in using Hangouts or YouTube, and you can ask us questions there as well. So to quickly recap, please use Vue meta to set title and meta descriptions properly, because they are really important to make users understand that your website is the thing that they are looking for. Make sure to use the history route when you are using Vue Router, because fragment URLs or hashbang URLs are not well supported in search engines in general. Use the mobile-friendly test for a quick check of your stuff, and do have a look at Search Console, because it does proactively inform you about things going wrong. And if you have any questions, don't write me a direct message saying like, hey, can you check my website? Because the answer is no, I can't. I can't check your website. What I can do is I can help people in public. So if you have a Webmaster Forum thread, that's great for me, because there's a lot of experts that will help you out of the box already, and they're probably faster and smarter than I am. If not, then I will probably look into them at some point, because guess what? I have other things to do as well. But basically, Webmaster Forum is the best place to ask any questions or have insights for your website specifically. Merci vielmals, dass ihr mir zugehört habt. If you have any questions or need anything, I'll be around.